Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is the Raptor, and welcome back to Who'd Win and Why. And to kick off Season 9, we've got a battle between the two sci-fi captains. We've got Captain Kirk from Star Trek going up against Han Solo from Star Wars. Now, before we start this video, some of you may be wondering whether or not their ships are going to be used in this fight, and the answer to that question is a big fat no, simply because it takes way more people to operate the U.S.S. Enterprise than it does the Millennium Falcon, and it's also worth noting that the Enterprise is incomprehensibly bigger than the Millennium Falcon and more powerful, so it just doesn't make any logical sense. So like all the other fights on Who Win and Why, we're just going to keep these guys at ground level and see who would realistically win in a one-on-one battle to the death. So, who'd win and why? Let's find out! So first we're going to start off with Captain Kirk, and where better to start off with this character than with his weapons. So obviously the primary weapon that he carries around with him is his phaser, which is something that all Starfleet officers carry around with them at all times. And essentially what it does is it shoots out a stream of pulsed energy projectiles at a target. And essentially, the two main modes that it has are the stun mode and the kill mode. The stun mode effectively knocks over the target and usually knocks them out completely, and the kill mode effectively vaporizes the target completely no matter where it hits the target. So it's pretty deadly. It's called kill mode for a reason. The phaser also has some lesser known modes, allowing it to be used as a cutting tool, and can also create heat sources by firing at objects, and it can even strike multiple targets at once. And with enough practice with this weapon, Kirk has become a great marksman and can use it very effectively in long-range combat. Kirk also carries around a 12.8-inch Kabar combat knife, which is part of the standard equipment in his safety gear. Obviously, Kirk has more gear than this. He also has his communicator, but the knife and the phaser are the main weapons that he has and the main things that he uses for offensive combat. When it comes to Kirk's fighting experience, Kirk has actually fought quite a number of characters in a one-on-one close quarters fight, and these can include regular henchmen, like regular one-off henchmen, but also characters that are way out of his league in terms of physicality, which includes Spock, Khan, and even the Gorn, a very strong and durable alien. Now, it is worth noting for all of the fights that he's fought someone physically superior than he is, he has had to use other methods in order to survive the fight or win the fight. For example, when he fought Spock, he had to fake his own death, and when he fought the Gorn, he had to use a very specific weapon in order to beat him. But just the fact that he was able to survive the punches and deal any sort of damage back to these characters is very impressive, and it shows that he can use his wits to think his way out of very tough situations like these. So no matter how you look at it, it is very impressive he's able to survive fights with these characters. In addition to the fact that he's fought a lot of opponents up close and personal, Kirk has also developed his own fighting style, which kind of mixes together other elements from other fighting styles, and part of what this includes is hand chops, wrestling and judo throws, roundhouse punches, open slaps, drop kicks, and even more. These have proven quite effective, surprisingly, against enemy henchmen, and he is very adept at dodging a lot of different attacks, whether that be phaser fire or just standard punches. When it comes to his intelligence, Kirk has been shown to be a pretty intelligent man, at least when it comes to starship systems and commanding a starship, but where he really shines is in his tactical genius. Kirk, as I mentioned before, has been able to take on very impressive opponents and was able to beat them by outwitting them, and he's even been able to think him and his crew out of extremely tough situations numerous times, and sometimes with very little time to think. Even the Klingons themselves have said that Kirk is a very worthy adversary. So if the alien race that essentially eats, sleeps, and breathes the warrior life is saying that Kirk is an impressive foe, then you know that that means he's a very impressive fighter as well as a pretty impressive thinker. However, while Kirk has been able to do some very impressive things, he is definitely not perfect. Even though he has been able to defeat a lot of opponents that are way out of his league in terms of strength, he is still very much human and is limited to those human capabilities. Plus, he can also get very aggressive at times, especially when his crew is at stake, and that can sometimes cloud his better judgment. But, despite all of that, Kirk truly has done and seen it all. And you can ask any of his crewmates, they will tell you that Kirk will do whatever it takes to get the job done, even if that means bending quite a number of rules in the process. So now that we're finished with Kirk, it's time to shift gears and move over to Han Solo. We all know Han Solo. He's our favorite smuggler and pilot from the Star Wars universe, and he started doing it maybe at an earlier age than you would have thought. He was orphaned at a very early age on his home planet, and he needed to start smuggling at that age in order to survive. He's had so much experience doing it that he's been regarded as the best pilot in the galaxy, and at very least one of the best smugglers in the galaxy, so you know he's really good at what he does. Han's weapon of choice is his own personal blaster, also known as the Mauser C-96. 6, and he always has this thing out during battle and carries it around with him at all times. This gun essentially fires red laser bullets which can kill most foes in a single shot, and over time he's become very skilled with this weapon and become a very great marksman, and he's also very adept at dodging enemy fire. I mean, when you survive this long in Star Wars canon, you kind of have to be good at dodging. Obviously, as I mentioned before, Han is a very experienced smuggler and has a lot of experience infiltrating and escaping enemy bases. He's also very deceptive and cunning, and can use his words to talk his way out of very tough situations and predicaments that he might not necessarily be able to fight his way out of. So regardless, he's always going to be able to escape. In terms of who Han Solo has fought different bounty hunters, smugglers, and different kinds of troops, including stormtroopers. In fact, in Solo: A Star Wars Story, spoilers by the way if you haven't seen the movie, Solo actually survived a run-in with Chewie the first time they met, and considering that Chewie was very ruthless and most likely starving, that was not easy to do, so props to Han Solo for being able to survive that. Even though Han Solo has definitely done a lot of commendable things on his own as a smuggler, a lot of the most impressive things that he's done, arguably, were when he was with the rebellion against the Empire, considering that he's survived numerous battles against the Empire alongside his friends, and he's also participated in many different high-stake and complicated heists over the years. And it's also worth noting that he actually led a Wookiee rebellion alongside Chewbacca against the Empire, so needless to say, he's had his fair share of really weird experiences. Much like Captain Kirk, Han Solo doesn't have a lot of exploitable weaknesses, at least not on the surface, but it is worth noting that he is pretty cynical and sometimes pretty stubborn, and he can be reckless at times, which can lead him into serious trouble. It can lead him into instances where really he can't really fight his way out of, and he really needs to rely on either his friends or his words in order to escape the situation. However, maybe his stubborn attitude and reckless tendencies are part of the reason why we all love Han Solo so much. He is definitely the definition of badassery, at least in the Star Wars universe, and he is very well aware that he is the best pilot and smuggler in the entire Star Wars galaxy. Alright, so now that I've gone over both of these characters, it's time for me to finally say who I personally think would win in this fight. And I just want to say before I say anything that no matter who you're rooting for, this fight is ridiculously close. Especially because while these two universes are both pretty powerful, these two characters, Kirk and Solo, are relatively grounded in comparison, and they are very human with human capabilities. So it is really hard to distinguish which character is actually better, or who would win in a fight. However, after looking at all the information that I have on these two characters, I do honestly think that Captain Kirk would be the winner of this fight. And I can already see a lot of Star Wars fans are really upset with that. They really think that Han Solo would win, or they want Han Solo to win. And I do have to admit, on average, Star Wars is a more powerful world than Star Trek. And, you know, a lot of people really do like Han Solo, and they legitimately think that he would win in a fight. I've seen that a lot on the internet. And full disclosure, I like Star Wars and Han Solo much more than Star Trek and Captain Kirk. However, I do still think that Captain Kirk would be the winner of this fight, and I personally think I can make a good case for him. So even if you disagree, please just hear me out and then leave your comments. Alright, let's go. First, let's discuss weaponry. Now, I just want to get one thing out of the way real quick. If these two characters were kept at a distance, then it would be virtually impossible to tell who would win this fight, because both of these characters are great marksmen, they both have very powerful guns, and they're both really good at dodging enemy fire, so it would be really hard to decipher who would win in a fight like this. It would really just be based on luck. I do think it's worth noting that Kirk's gun is technically more versatile, as it has many different modes, whereas Han Solo's just has the one mode, and at its most powerful mode, it is more powerful, as it literally vaporizes the target no matter where it hits it, whereas with Han Solo, while it is very powerful, the gun does not have a 100% kill rate. But ultimately, I'm not going to hold that against Han Solo, because I know that both of these characters could easily kill the other character if they were kept at a distance, so I'm not going to hold that against Han Solo whatsoever. However, while their blasters may be relatively even against each other, it is worth noting that Captain Kirk still carries around his Kabar combat knife, which Han Solo doesn't really have anything comparable to, which means that Captain Kirk does outclass him in versatility and has more options in terms of long-range and short-range combat. Ultimately, however, what this really comes down to is their fighting ability and fighting experience. They're both great long-range, but how do they stack up to each other close-range? In that category, I honestly feel that Kirk has a very prominent edge, and here's why. Kirk has proven time and time again that he can stand up to characters that are way out of his league physically, including fighting Spock, Gorn, and Khan. And it is worth noting that for all of these instances, and even other instances that I just haven't brought up yet, every single one of these characters are trying to kill Kirk. They're not holding back for any reason whatsoever, meaning that they're using their full strength, which again is way above Kirk's strength. And in all of these instances, Kirk has actually been able to beat all of them, except for Spock, where he had to fake his own death. And yes, as I mentioned before, Kirk has never actually been able to beat any of these characters with his raw strength alone. He's always had to find a workaround. But that does mean that he's been able to use his wits to outsmart all of his opponents and is able to beat all of them in the process, which is really impressive. And even if he didn't, the fact that he's able to actually trade blows with these characters as long as he did, which is actually a surprisingly long time, is extremely impressive. He's actually able to deal damage to his opponents and is able to take even more damage in return and is able to get right back up. So the fact that he's able to do this with characters that are way out of his league in terms of strength is extremely impressive, and more impressive than anything Han Solo has done. This doesn't necessarily mean that Kirk is stronger and more durable than Han Solo, but it does mean that he can rely on it and actually has more experience using it. And to be honest, weapon or no, if Kirk has been able to take on the Gorn for as long as he did, he shouldn't have any problem being able to overpower Han Solo in close quarters combat. Han Solo has been in a lot of fights of his own. He's fought bounty hunters, he's fought stormtroopers, he's fought smugglers, etc., etc., but a lot of these fights were with the use of his blaster, and it's implied that he has to rely on his blaster in order to deal any sort of significant damage. Yes, he's able to fire back very hard, and he's able to dodge a lot of enemy fire, but the fact is, he's barely had any sort of close quarters combat experience, and definitely not as much as Kirk. So even though both of them have been able to do combat, you know, from a very far distance and have been able to shoot their opponents with great accuracy, only one of these characters has had any real close quarters combat experience or training, and that's Captain Kirk. Probably the most impressive fight that Han Solo has ever been in was his fight with Chewie in Solo: A Star Wars Story, as he didn't have his blaster with him and was forced to survive against Chewie for as long as he could. It was expected that he was going to die. But, truth be told, he really didn't do that much damage to Chewie in return, and Chewie didn't even throw him around for that long. It was impressive that he was able to survive as long as he did. That actually did impress me a little bit. That does mean that he can take somewhat of a beating, but he wasn't able to deal any damage in return, and ultimately he did have to use his mouth in order to get out of that situation, as he normally does. So even though that is probably the most impressive thing he's done, when you compare it to what Kirk has done, actually fighting the Gorn and Spock, you know, up close for a very long time and dealing punches back, it's just not as impressive. Han Solo just doesn't have that kind of experience. And because of this, Captain Kirk is naturally the better fighter. He's had more experience and he's picked up on a lot of fighting techniques. In fact, as I mentioned before, he has his own fighting technique which kind of blends in different kinds of fighting styles, which is way better than anything Han can say in terms of close quarters combat. Both of these characters are very intelligent in terms of tactics. Both of them are able to think on their feet very quickly and easily, and they're able to escape even the toughest situations. But there is a difference. Whenever Kirk is in a fight and is thinking on his feet, he's always thinking, how do I defeat this enemy? However, when Han Solo is in a fight or in any situation and he needs to think on his feet, he's always thinking, how do I get out of this situation? And that's really the main difference between these two characters. Han Solo is a smuggler and a pilot above all else, and he doesn't have a lot of experience in terms of close quarters combat, nor did he have any training in order to do so because that's not his job. He's a smuggler and a pilot. He's not a fighter. And while he is definitely the best at what he does, and that's a reason why we all love him so much, the fact is he's just not cut out for that kind of life. He's not cut out in terms of actually fighting anyone head on. He's just using his blaster, infiltrating, escaping, which is what he's trained to do, but never actually fighting up close. And yes, the same thing could be said about Captain Kirk, as he's a captain above all else, but unlike the other captains of Star Trek, Captain Kirk is always willing to go down on away teams, and he's always willing to take the fight head on if the situation calls for it. He's simply just had more experience with short range and close range combat, and usually that's by his own request. Kirk is willing to do whatever it takes to win the fight, whereas Han Solo just doesn't have that kind of experience, and it really doesn't work well in a battle to the death like this. And that actually makes a lot of sense considering that Chewie is considered the muscle of the duo, kind of like in a Rocket Raccoon and Groot dynamic from Guardians of the Galaxy. Even Solo: A Star Wars Story, which was supposed to delve more into his experiences and give us more about the character, only reinforced the point that he just doesn't have that kind of fighting experience. At the beginning of the movie, when he's surrounded by guards, he doesn't even try to fight back and is immediately apprehended easily. He's not able to do anything. In the middle middle of the movie, when he's surrounded by guards again, Chewie comes in to save him, and it's just really implied that if Chewie wasn't there, Han wouldn't have been able to fight his way out on his own. And in the final fight, he's using his, like, against the main villain, he's using his blaster, and whenever it gets knocked out of his hand, he always needs to hide, and Kira is the one that needs to save him and kill the enemy. So it just reinforces the fact that Han Solo cannot fight if he doesn't have a blaster in his hand, whereas Kirk 100% can. Overall, both of these characters have been at their games for a very long time, but when you really look at this fight from a fighting perspective, Kirk is simply superior. They both have a lot of long-range experience, but only Kirk has had the short-range experience, being able to take on characters way out of his league, and Han Solo just doesn't have that kind of experience, and he's indirectly proven that he just can't take on fights head-on, at least not on his own. And while either of these characters could definitely win it when kept at a distance, you really have to look at the other attributes in order to determine a concrete winner, and I personally feel that Kirk's better physical traits, fighting skill, strategies, weaponry, and overwhelmingly better close quarters experience would give him the win after a hard-fought battle. So, in my opinion, the winner is Captain Kirk. So guys, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Who'd Win and Why is finally back. I know that it took a ridiculously long time for it to come back. It's been like 3 months or something like that. But school is just a complete pain in the ass, but now it's finally done, so I'm hoping to get these videos out at a much quicker rate nowadays. Hopefully, summer is still going to be pretty busy for me, but we'll just see how it goes. At least now we've gotten an episode out, so that's a good sign. So if you enjoyed this episode, please give this video a huge like. I always appreciate the likes. Comment down below what you think, what you thought of the video. Who do you think would actually win this fight? If you still feel that Han Solo will win this fight, that's awesome. That's still, like, I definitely understand that, but please tell me why down in the comments below. I'd really love to hear it. And also comment down what you'd like to see for future Who'd Win and Why episodes. And if you could subscribe to my channel, guys, that'd be so great. That would really help my channel out. I do this this is the primary thing I do on this channel. If you're new, then yeah, this is the primary thing I do on this channel, and I always try to make sure, you know, to listen to you guys in the comments, and, you know, I also have reaction videos, and I try to get these kinds of videos out as soon as I possibly can. But no matter what you do on the channel, your view is plenty of contribution. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And next time on Who'd Win and Why, we got Deathstroke going up against Taskmaster. See you all then.